As the Doctor Who production team went into its 26th season, Andrew Cartmel was working on expanding his master plan. He had started this master plan in the previous season's Remembrance of the Daleks. This master plan involved bringing back the mystery to the Doctor, which had been slowly lost since 1969's The War Games. The conclusion to this plan would have been in the next season, season 27, had the show not been cancelled. But speaking of Remembrance of the Daleks, the writer, Ben Aronovich, was asked back to write a story called Storm over Avalon. This story would see the return of UNIT, a staple of the John Pertwee era, and would of course see the return of its creator, Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart, played by the legendary Nicholas Courtney. So, let's take a look back at the opening story of season 26, Battlefield. During the story, we find out that Brigadier Winifred Bambera, played by Angela Bruce, has taken Lethbridge Stewart's place due to his retirement. This was a very clever move by Aronovich, I think, casting a female and one of colour as this very high-ranking character, as at the time this wasn't particularly the case in many other stories, although it was starting to trickle in. At this point, the Doctor and Ace have arrived after receiving a distress signal. They hitch a lift from archaeologist Peter Wormsley, played by James Ellis. He is excavating an old battlefield near Carberry. As they arrive at the dig, they discover it has been taken over by UNIT soldiers. With the Doctor wanting to see the Brigadier, they get their IDs checked but are told to leave. This is where one of the soldiers tells Bambera that when Lethbridge Stewart was in charge, there was a person called the Doctor, who was their scientific advisor. And also that he has changed his entire physical appearance before. This tips Bambera over the edge, and she gives the Doctor and Ace a lift to the nearby Gore Crow Hotel and asks UNIT headquarters to recall Lethbridge Stewart to duty. At the hotel, Ace meets Xiao Young, played by Ling Tai, while the Doctor talks to Elizabeth Rallinson, played by June Bland. She is blind but psychic and talks to the Doctor about the ancient scabbard over the inn's fireplace, an artefact found by Wormsley, and that it is an object of tremendous and mysterious power. At this point, it's worth pausing for a second so we can talk about the fabulous music for this story, composed by 7th Doctor era veteran Keith McCulloch. I mean, just listen to it, it's glorious. Right, back to the plot. Outside the hotel, Ace and Xiao chat about explosives, and coincidentally, an oddly human-shaped missile crashes into innkeeper Pat Rallinson's microbrewery. It is revealed to be a knight in full armour, not an android, as Ace initially thinks, and when his helmet is removed, he warmly greets the Doctor as Merlin. This is one of my favourite aspects of the story, as unlike many other stories, the Doctor just goes along with it, almost revelling in people calling him Merlin. This knight they have found is known as Anselin, and he is played by Marcus Gilbert. At this point, the story changes from a straightforward sci-fi to a historical sci-fi. Now, enough about the plot, as I'm sure I've confused you enough already, because I feel like I should use the rest of this review to talk about the man himself, Nicholas Courtney. This is his last appearance in the main programme. He would later of course appear in the 30th anniversary Children in Need special, Dimensions in Time, and his final appearance in the world of Doctor Who would be in the Sarah Jane Adventures episode Enemy of the Bane. The man's death was referenced in the series 6 finale, The Wedding of River Song. We don't talk about Cyberbreak, but let's go back to Courtney's first appearance in Doctor Who, back in 1965, in part 1 of The Daleks' Master Plan, playing Brett Vian. The director of that story, Douglas Camfield, remembered him when it came to casting Colonel Lethbridge Stewart in The Web of Fear. Courtney, sporting a false moustache, proved popular amongst the cast members, and the story proved popular with the public. So, when the producer of the show, Derek Sherwin, thought the show needed a revised format, he looked at the success of The Web of Fear, and thought that this Earth-based format would work. As a test pilot, he wrote The Invasion, and brought back the Colonel.
It's Colonel Lethbridge Stewart.
Brigadier now. I've gone up in the world.
During production, Courtney was asked if he would like a more permanent role in the series from season 7 onwards. He agreed instantly. He was in most stories from season 7's Spearhead from Space to season 10's The Three Doctors. From then, he would only appear in some stories until the season 13 opener, Terror of the Zygons, where the Brigadier wouldn't appear again for several years. He would return for season 20's Mordrin Undead and The Five Doctors, before appearing in Battlefield. The Brigadier would have died at the end of the story, but this was abandoned. The Brigadier's legacy has lived on since his first appearance in 1967, and Courtney always proves an enjoyable watch. He passed away on the 22nd of February 2011. He was 81.